Have you ever felt like you know someone so well you can predict every move, every word, every breath? I thought I knew Raphael like that. 6 years of friendship, 8 months sharing the same apartment in Portland, countless late nights talking about 80s music and life. I thought I knew everything about him. I thought I understood every smile, every silence. But that December night, when I pretended to be asleep and he brushed my hair thinking I didn't feel it, everything I believed I knew collapsed in seconds. My name is Lucas. I'm 23 and work as a graphic designer, basically chained to my computer in my bedroom most of the day, making campaigns for a small marketing agency. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me stay home, which has always been my thing. I've always been more introspective, the guy who'd rather watch the party than be the center of it. Rafa always teased me about that. He'd say I overthink everything, that I live inside my own head. He wasn't wrong. Raphael, or Rafa as everyone calls him, is the complete opposite. 24, a PE teacher at the public school down the street, always tanned because he spends half his time outdoors, always smiling that smile that lights up the whole room. He's one of those guys who walks into a room and people just notice. It's not just the looks, though the sun-streaked brown hair and athletic build don't hurt. It's the energy. He has this way of making you feel seen, important. Like in that moment you're the only person who matters. He's been like that since we met in high school. I was the team photographer for his soccer team. He played, I shot. Our friendship started one of those nights after a game, when we stayed up late talking about bands no one our age seemed to know. We discovered we were both obsessed with the Smiths and Depeche Mode. Sounds silly now, but in that moment it felt like fate. From then on we were inseparable. Best friend, brother, the person I called when I needed anything. And for 6 years that's exactly what it was. Simple, safe, platonic. 8 months ago, Rafa broke up with a long, messy relationship. He was wrecked, needed somewhere to stay, and I had a 2-bedroom apartment I could barely afford on my own. It made total sense. Split the rent, have company, help my best friend when he needed it. Everyone thought it was a great idea. And it was. At first. But I had no idea I was signing my own sentence. There are things you don't predict when you decide to live with someone. You don't predict what it will be like to see them every morning. Hair a mess, and voice thick with sleep. You don't predict what it will be like to hear them singing in the shower, or to find them in the kitchen at 3 a.m. when neither of you can sleep. You don't predict the intimacy that builds when you share the same space, breathe the same air, live on the same rhythms. And you definitely don't predict how your heart will start racing when he brushes past you in the narrow hallway by accident, or how you'll start noticing details you never paid attention to before. The way he bites his lip when he's focused, how his eyes get darker when he's tired, how he always touches people when he talks. A hand on a shoulder, a palm on an arm, like touch is as natural to him as breathing. I never admitted, not even to myself, that there was anything beyond friendship. Not when I started seeing these things. Not when I realized my gaze lingered longer than it should when he stepped out of the shower wearing only a towel. Not when I started sketching his hands in my sketchbook without meaning to. I just shoved those thoughts into a dark corner of my mind and pretended they didn't exist. Because admitting it would be dangerous. Admitting it would mean risking the only friendship that really mattered. Worse, admitting it would mean facing something about myself I wasn't ready to deal with. December in Portland is mild, but the small apartment's lack of cooling made it feel like an oven. And it was just when the air conditioner broke that I went to sleep on the couch, escaping the heat and the street noise. Rafa said it was like camping. That night I was on the sofa, sweating even while still, listening to the old fans hum. Rafa had been in his room for hours. I was in that weird place between awake and asleep, you know, when your mind starts to drift but you're still aware of where you are, the weight of your body, the sweat at the nape of your neck. My eyes were closed, my breathing slow and deep. To anyone looking, I was asleep. Maybe I was almost there, until I heard footsteps, light, bare feet on the cold floor, coming from the hallway. I recognized them immediately as Rafa's. You learn those things when you live together. The sounds each person makes, the rhythm of their walk, the weight of their steps. I thought he was heading to the kitchen for water. I kept my eyes closed. No reason to open them. I was so close to finally falling asleep. But the steps didn't go to the kitchen. They came toward the living room, toward me. I felt him stop near the couch. I felt his presence there, just inches away. The air changed. I can't really explain it, but when someone's that close, you feel it, even with your eyes closed. My whole body became aware of him, every nerve ending suddenly on alert. My first instinct was to open my eyes, ask if everything was okay. But something made me hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the instinct that opening my eyes then would break something. So I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed, pretending to keep sleeping. And then he touched my hair. It was gentle, delicate. His fingers slid through the short strands near my forehead, moving aside a few that had stuck with sweat. A touch so soft that if I had really been asleep, I might not have felt it. But I did. I felt every millimeter of that contact. I felt the warmth of his hand. I felt the careful, almost reverent way, as if I were something fragile. My heart exploded. I started shaking inside, trying desperately to keep my body still so I wouldn't give myself away. My mind was screaming, firing thousands of questions at once. What is he doing? Why is he touching me like that? Is this normal? Do friends do this? What does it mean? And then he leaned in closer. I felt his breath graze my ear. He whispered something. I couldn't make out the words. It was too quiet, too muffled, or maybe my own heart pounding in my ears swallowed the sound. I tried to focus, tried to catch every syllable, but it was useless. All I registered was the tone. It wasn't playful. It wasn't casual. It was heavy, laden with something I couldn't name but felt down my spine. And then he pulled away. I heard footsteps back down the hall, his bedroom door opening and closing softly. And I sat there, alone in the dark, my heart trying to burst out of my chest and my mind in complete chaos. In that moment, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. I opened my eyes, stared at the ceiling. The fan was turning lazily, shadows dancing. Everything was exactly as it had been 5 minutes earlier. But nothing was the same. Absolutely nothing. Because now I knew. Or rather, I couldn't pretend I didn't know anymore. That touch wasn't accidental. That whisper wasn't casual. There was something there. Something Rafa felt. Something he kept. Something he only let out because he thought I was asleep, that it was safe, that I wouldn't know. I wanted him to come back. Wanted to understand that whisper. But panic paralyzed me. If I was right, everything would change. If I was wrong, I would lose my best friend. And worse. What did that say about me? What did it mean that my heart sped up for him? The way his hands moved. The wanting of that touch? I turned onto my side on the couch, then to the other side, then back to the first position. Impossible to get comfortable. Impossible to calm my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that touch again. I saw his shadow leaning over me. I heard the echo of that whisper I couldn't decipher. What did you say, Rafa? What were you thinking? What do you feel when you look at me and think, I don't see? Hours dragged on. 2 a.m., 3, 4. Light, starting to brighten the window. And I was still awake, still spinning the same questions, still feeling ghosts of that touch on my skin. When I finally heard Rafa moving in his room, getting ready to wake up like he does every morning at 6 to go to work, a new kind of panic settled in. I was going to have to see him. I was going to have to fake normal. I was going to have to look him in the eyes and act like nothing had happened, like my world hadn't been turned upside down a few hours earlier. I squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to fall back asleep. I heard him leave his room, walk through the living room toward the bathroom. I felt him pause. I felt his gaze on me. How long did he stand there just looking? 10 seconds? 20? It felt like an eternity. And then he moved on, the bathroom door closing, the shower turning on. I opened my eyes slowly, looked at the ceiling again, and I realized with a tightness in my stomach that this was my new reality. I wasn't going to be able to unsee what I'd seen. I wasn't going to be able to deny what I'd felt. And worst of all, I wouldn't be able to stop asking myself, what did that whisper mean? And what was I going to do with this information I couldn't admit I had? How do you look into the eyes of someone you love when that person can never know that you know their secret? When you have your own secret, larger and scarier, kept in the same dark place it's always been, but now pulsing, alive, impossible to ignore? The shower turned off. I heard Rafa moving in the bathroom, brushing his teeth, getting ready for the day. In a few minutes he'd come out, see me, waking up, say good morning with that smile of his, and I'd have to respond. I'd have to act normal. I sat up on the couch, ran my hands over my face, adjusted my glasses with fingers that trembled slightly. I grabbed my sketchbook that was on the coffee table, opened to a blank page, tried to focus on anything that wasn't the sound of him on the other side of the wall. But when the pencil touched the paper, without thinking, without planning, I started to draw. And what appeared, inevitable as breathing, was his hand. The long fingers, the curve of the palm, exactly as I remembered seeing them 1,000 times. Exactly as I'd felt in my hair hours ago. The bathroom door opened. Footsteps headed toward the living room. My heart raced again. And then Rafa appeared, hair still damp, in his work uniform. That morning smile that always made me feel like the day would be good. But this time, when our eyes met, I saw something different. Or maybe it had always been there and I had never let myself see. A softness, an intensity, something that made my stomach twist. Good morning, sleep well? His voice normal, casual, like nothing had happened. I shut the notebook quickly, praying he hadn't seen what I was drawing. I forced a smile, forced normality. As good as you can sleep in this heat. He laughed, that easy laugh I knew so well. Yeah, impossible, right? Thank God for coffee. He went to the kitchen. I stayed there, breath held, hands gripping the notebook, trying to process. He was acting completely normal, as if the night before hadn't happened, as if that touch, that whisper, were just products of my imagination. For a second, I almost believed it. Almost convinced myself I'd dreamed it all, that my mind had invented the whole scene because it's what I secretly wanted, not what had actually happened. But then Rafa came back with 2 mugs of coffee, handed me one, and when our fingers touched passing them over for a fraction of a second, he held on. Just a moment longer than necessary. Just enough for me to know, to be sure. It wasn't imagination. It happened. And he knew I knew, or suspected, or was testing, or waiting. Thank you. My voice came out raspier than I intended. He smiled. That smile that used to be simple and now was loaded with meanings I couldn't decode. We need to do something about this air conditioner sometime, huh? We can't keep going like this. We can't keep going like this. The words echoed. Was he talking only about the heat? Or about something else? About us? The tension that now filled every inch of space between our bodies? Yeah, that was all I could say. He stood there another second, looking at me, and I looked back. And in that silence, that small space between 2 breaths, there was everything. All the questions, all the fear, all the desire, everything neither of us was ready to admit. Then he blinked, the moment broke, and he went to finish getting ready to leave. I have to go. See you later. See you later. My voice a whisper. The door closed. He left. And I sat there on the couch where I'd pretended to sleep, holding a mug of coffee he'd made for me, the notebook full of drawings of his hands hidden beside me, and a single certainty burning in my chest. Nothing would go back to the way it was, and I had no idea what to do with that. The coffee cooled in my hands. Beside me, the hidden notebook, evidence of my graphite obsession. Rafa was probably already at school, smiling at the world. And there I was, alone, holding a certainty that burned. I poured the coffee down the sink. The apartment's silence weighed on me, forcing me to relive his touch, the whisper swallowed by the fan. 8 months living together. 6 years of safe, comfortable friendship, all destroyed in one night. I went back to the couch and opened the notebook. Last night's drawing, his hands intertwined. I ran my finger over the graphite, smudging my skin. My dirty secrets. Now, after that touch, that look, or was I making it all up? I shook my head. I shut the notebook hard, pushed it back between the cushions, deep where he couldn't see if he got home early. I needed to work. I had a project due by the end of the week. The agency client was waiting for the final campaign layouts. A deadline's a deadline, no matter if your personal life is falling apart. But pretending to be fine has a price. And the bill was about to come due. I opened the laptop, stared at the screen. The Photoshop files looked like hieroglyphs. I couldn't process anything. Every attempt to focus on the designs dragged me back to the same image. Rafa, bent over me, his hand in my hair, his breath near my face. Why had he done that? Friends don't touch like that. Friends don't whisper in the dark. But I hadn't been asleep. I'd trespassed into his secret without permission. Guilt hit then, heavy and nauseating. I should have given some sign I was awake. I should have turned, said something, broken that moment before it became this huge thing I didn't know how to carry. But I hadn't done any of that. I had stayed there, frozen, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he'd hear it. I'd pretended to sleep while every nerve in my body was on fire, because part of me had wanted it. Had wanted that touch longer than I was willing to admit. And that was the scariest truth of all. The phone rang. I almost dropped the laptop. My heart raced again. I looked at the screen. It wasn't him. It was my boss, Ricardo. A video call. Shit. I took 3 deep breaths, adjusted my glasses, that nervous tic I've had since I was a teen, ran my hand through my hair, trying to look remotely presentable. Accepted the call. Ricardo appeared on screen, that same look he always has, half impatient, half tired. Morning, Lucas. Everything all right there? All good. My voice sounded more or less normal, miraculously normal. How did I manage that? I wanted to review the campaign layouts before sending them to the client. Can you show me what you've got so far? I can, of course. And so, for 20 minutes, I became someone else. The person I needed to be to keep functioning in the world. I talked about color palettes, visual hierarchy, the psychology behind typographic choices, showed the files, took suggestions, made notes, all while my mind screamed underneath the surface. Nice work, Lucas. Ricardo smiled, that satisfied boss smile. Can you finalize and send it by tomorrow morning? You got it. Great. See ya. See ya. The call ended. The mask fell. I threw myself back onto the couch, covered my face with my hands. 20 minutes. 20 minutes of forced normality. 20 minutes proving to myself that I could still function, that I could still separate work life from the emotional mess. But when the obligation was over, everything came back. The anxiety, the fear, the desire. Rafa. I looked at the clock. 10:15. He'd be back around 5 in the afternoon. I had the whole day to decide what to do. How to act when he walked through the door. Pretend nothing happened? Act normal like he was trying to act? Or confront him? Ask directly about what had happened the night before. Just thinking about the second option made my stomach churn. I couldn't. I didn't have the courage. What if he denied it? What if he said I'd misunderstood, that it was just a friendly gesture? What if he said I was imagining things where there was nothing? Worse. What if he admitted it? What if he said yes, that it had meant something, that he had feelings he shouldn't have? And then, what would happen next? We could lose everything. The friendship, our living situation, this life we'd built together, imperfect though it was, full of unspoken tensions. I couldn't risk that. I decided I would avoid him, keep my distance emotionally. It was the only way. I worked the rest of the day, sent the files, cleaned the apartment, hid the notebook, kept my hands busy so my mind wouldn't go back to him. 5 o'clock came too fast. I heard the key in the door. My whole body tensed. Rafa came in, backpack on his shoulder, the school t-shirt clinging to his body from the heat. His hair was damp with sweat. A few strands stuck to his forehead. He smiled when he saw me. That easy, natural smile that always completely disarmed me. Hey, rough day. Normal. Finished the project. That's good. He threw his backpack on the floor, went straight to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, drank half of it at once. The line of his neck moved with each gulp. Don't look. Don't look at him like that. I'm going to shower. This heat is unbearable. Go ahead. He passed by me on his way to the bathroom, passed close, too close in the narrow hallway of the apartment. Our arms brushed, for a second. Just skin against skin. Electricity. He stopped, looked at me. I looked back. Silence. And in that second, I knew he knew, that something had shifted and he felt it too. That new and terrifying thing between us that had no name but had a presence. It had weight. His eyes searched mine. There was a question there. A question he didn't know how to ask. I didn't know how to answer. So I broke eye contact. First, I turned my face away. I heard him take a deep breath. Once. Twice. Then he kept walking. The bathroom door closed. The shower turned on. And I stood there in the hallway, shaking, the sensation of his touch still burning on my arm. Avoid. I had decided to avoid. But how would I avoid someone who shared every inch of the space with me? How avoid someone who knew every expression on my face, every silence, every different breath? How avoid someone who, 8 months ago, had chosen to come here when he could have gone anywhere else? Who had chosen to stay with me? The shower water kept running. I could picture him in there, letting the hot water wash the day's fatigue away. His shoulders relaxing, his eyes closed. I shook my head violently. Stop. Just stop. I went to my room, closed the door, sat on the bed. I grabbed my phone, opened random chats with friends, tried to distract myself. It didn't work. I threw the phone away. I lay down, looked at the ceiling. The damp stains in the corner formed patterns I'd memorized from so many sleepless nights. Nights thinking about him. Nights drawing him in my mind when I couldn't take the notebook. Nights hearing him move in the room next door. Imagining things I shouldn't imagine. How much longer could I stand this? The water stopped. I heard him move in the bathroom, the door opening. Steps in the hallway. A knock on my door. Lucas? His voice. Soft. Hesitant. My heart stopped. Yes? I'm going to make pasta for dinner. Want some? I do. Silence on the other side of the door, as if he was waiting for me to say something more. I didn't. Okay, it'll be ready in about 20 minutes. The footsteps moved away. My breathing returned. Dinner. We'd have to eat together. Sit across from each other at the table. Talk. Act normal. Normal. I didn't know what that meant anymore. I got up, adjusted my glasses again. That stupid twitch that gave me away every time I was nervous. 20 minutes. I had 20 minutes to build a convincing facade. Could I do it? I don't know. But when I left the bedroom and went to the kitchen, he was there. Back to me. Stirring the sauce on the stove. The old t-shirt he wore at home showed the line of his shoulders. The back I had drawn countless times. And when he turned and smiled, that smile that was only for me, different from the smile he gave to the rest of the world, I knew. Avoiding wouldn't work. Not when we lived together. Not when every gesture of his pulled me deeper. Not when the distance between us was measured in centimeters but felt like an impassable chasm. Not when a part of me didn't want to avoid. I wanted the opposite. I wanted to ask. I wanted to know. I wanted to hear the truth, even if it destroyed me. But not today. Today I was going to sit down. I was going to eat the pasta he made. I was going to talk about his day, about his students, about Curitiba's unbearable heat in December. I was going to act normal. And I was going to observe. Every gesture, every look, every pause in the conversation, looking for signs, looking for confirmation or denial of what I'd seen the night before. Because that was all I had now. Observation, analysis, silence, and the growing, terrible, inevitable certainty that no matter how hard I tried to avoid it, something was going to break. The question was only when. Friday. Nothing had improved. I stopped at his bedroom door, my hands suspended. He was asleep. I gave up and went back to the couch. The heat stayed unbearable, mirroring my tension. I couldn't pretend normality anymore. After that dinner, after sitting at the same table we always sat at, eating the pasta he always made when it was his turn to cook, talking about his students and the annoying clients at the office, I thought I could get back to normal, that I would stop seeing that gesture in my head, his hand in my hair, the whisper I couldn't make out, but it didn't stop. It got worse. I watched everything, the different smile when I walked in, the unnecessary touch on the shoulder when he passed, the way he said, "Lucas." I was losing it, or not. And that was the scariest part, the possibility that I wasn't losing it, that all of this was real. Because if it was real, what was I going to do about it? The air conditioning was still broken. Of course it was. The tech had promised to come Monday, then Tuesday. Now he said Thursday. Rafa laughed when I told him. "We'll melt before then," he said, running his hand through his sweaty hair. He was shirtless. Again. Because of the heat, you know? Of course. I tried not to look, tried to keep my eyes on the computer screen, on the work I was pretending to do. But it was hard not to notice when he crossed the whole living room to get water in the kitchen. Hard not to notice the way the muscles in his back moved when he reached for the glass on the high shelf. Hard not to notice how the afternoon light came through the cheap blinds and made those golden stripes on his skin. I adjusted my glasses, took a deep breath. Focus, Lucas. Work. Focus on work. But then he came back, walked past behind me, and again that touch. Hand on my shoulder. Quick. Warm. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem kind of tense." Tense? Good word. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." "It's the heat," he said, as if that explained everything. And maybe it did. Maybe the heat explained why my heart raced every time he came close. Why my skin tingled where he touched. Why I couldn't think of anything but him. Blame the heat, sure. In the following days, the situation only got worse. Not the heat. Well, the heat too. But I mean the closeness. Because in a small 2-bedroom apartment like ours, you can't avoid the other person. Especially when you're trying to avoid them. We bumped into each other. In the narrow hallway. In the tiny kitchen. In the bathroom we shared. Every time I reached out to grab something, there was his hand too. Reaching for the same mug. The same towel. The same remote. And every time that happened, he looked at me. That look. It lasted half a second longer than it should. And in that half second, I saw something. Or I imagined it. I don't know anymore. There was a moment, Wednesday afternoon, when I almost asked, almost said, "Rafa, what is happening here?" We were in the kitchen. I was washing dishes because it was my turn. He was drying because he wanted to help. He always helped even when it wasn't his turn. Another one of those gestures I'd never thought much about. Until now. I handed the plate to him. Our fingers touched. Wet. Warm. Neither of us let go right away. We stood there, holding the same plate, looking at each other. And I saw it. In his eyes. Something that made my chest tighten and my breathing falter. Something that looked like. But then he blinked. Pulled the plate away. Smiled. "You gonna stand there all day or wash the rest?" he joked. Moment broken. Again. I went back to the sink, hands trembling slightly as I lathered another mug. How was I supposed to ask? How could I put into words what I couldn't even understand myself? "Hey, Rafa, that night when you touched my hair while I pretended to sleep, what did that mean?" Ridiculous. Pathetic. So I didn't ask. I just kept washing. And he kept drying. And we kept pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. And on Thursday night, everything almost fell apart. It was because of a stupid argument. About dishes. Irony of ironies. About who left the dirty pan in the sink last night. A silly thing. Something we always solved with a joke or a, "Sorry, I'll wash it now." But this time it was different. Because this time there was all that unspoken weight between us. All that accumulated tension. All that suffocating heat that had nothing to do with December. "I left it soaking," he said, defensive. "I was going to wash it this morning." "But you didn't wash it," I shot back, and my voice came out harsher than I intended. "You left it there all day." "Because I had to leave early for work, Lucas. You know that." "I work too, Rafa." "I know. It's not about that." "Then what is it about?" Silence. We were standing in the middle of the kitchen. He shirtless again because the damn air conditioning still hadn't been fixed. Me in an old sweaty t-shirt, stuck to my body. Too close. As always. "I don't know," he said finally. And his voice came out low. Tired. "I don't know what it's about." And that's when it happened. I took a step forward. I don't know why. Maybe to make a point. Maybe because some part of me wanted to be even closer. He didn't step back. 6 inches apart. Heat, sweat, quick breathing. His eyes dropped to my lips. The air went electric. He leaned in. I didn't step back. Heart pounding, I leaned in too. Closer. Warm breath on my face. And then he pulled away. Abruptly. Like he'd been shocked. He ran a hand across his face, turned his back. "Sorry," he murmured. Sorry. I'm gonna go for a walk." And he left. The door slammed behind him, leaving me there, in the middle of the kitchen, alone, shaking, heart still racing and my head trying to process what almost happened. We almost kissed. Almost. But no. Because he pulled away. Because he left. Because... Why? Because he regretted it? Because he realized it would be a mistake? Because he didn't want it? Or because he was scared? As scared as I was? I didn't know. And it was killing me. He came back 2 hours later. I was on the couch, pretending to watch something on TV. I don't even remember what. He came in, quiet, went straight to his room, stopped at the door, looked at me. "Good night, Lucas," he said. Just that. And shut the door. I stayed there, staring down the dark hallway, at the empty space where he'd been. And that night, everything became clear. We couldn't pretend anymore. We couldn't avoid it anymore. We couldn't just watch from a distance and hope it would pass. Because it wasn't going to pass. It was growing. Inside me. Inside him, maybe. Or I was crazy and it was only inside me. Either way, I needed to know. I needed to talk to him. I needed to ask. I needed something. That's why, at 12:23 a.m., I got up from the couch. I crossed the living room, the hallway, stopped in front of his bedroom door, and raised my hand. To knock. To wake him. To say everything that had been stuck in my throat for days. My hand hovered there, suspended, inches from the wood. I could hear his breathing on the other side, heavy, steady, already asleep, or pretending to sleep. Like I had pretended that night. Would be fair. Ironic even. My hand trembled. Knock, Lucas. Knock now. Talk to him. But I couldn't. Because if I knocked, if I spoke, everything would change. For better or worse, it didn't matter. It would change, and I was scared. Scared of the answer. Scared of rejection. Scared of losing the only person who made my life make sense. Scared of finding out it was all in my head, or worse, scared of finding out it wasn't. So I lowered my hand, took a step back, another, and went back to the couch, to the same spot where I'd pretended to sleep while he played with my hair, to the same spot where I couldn't sleep now, because I knew. I knew something was going to break. It had to break. It wasn't a question of if. It was a question of when. And who would be brave enough to let it happen? 3 sleepless nights, lying to myself that it was the heat. But it was him. The touch, the whisper, the image that wouldn't leave my head. 4th night, 3:20 a.m. The fan spun uselessly. His bedroom door opened. My whole body tensed. I pretended to be asleep. Again. Always again. But this time was different. I heard his bare feet coming toward the living room. Slow. Hesitant. Like he wasn't sure what he was doing either. I kept my eyes closed. Breathed slowly, trying to look relaxed when every muscle in my body was taut as a guitar string about to snap. The footsteps stopped. I felt him stop at the entrance to the living room. Felt the weight of his gaze on me. Felt the silence stretch between us like a rubber band about to break. How long did he stand there? 30 seconds? A minute? An eternity? And then his voice, low, hoarse with sleep or something I couldn't name. Lucas. My heart stopped. I know you're awake. I opened my eyes. Rafa was leaning in the doorway, just in shorts, arms crossed over his chest. The weak light from the window cast shadows across his face, but I could see his eyes. I could see that he hadn't slept either. I could see something there that scared me and called to me at the same time. Rafa, you're not okay. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. You've been weird around me for days. I sat up on the couch, ran a hand over my face, tried to find words that weren't lies but also weren't the truth I wasn't ready to say. It's just the heat. And work. Everything's... Stop. His voice cut my sentence in half. Stop lying to me. He stepped closer. 2 steps. 3. Stopped in front of the couch, looking down at me, and for the first time in 6 years of friendship, I didn't know how to look back at him. How long have we known each other, Lucas? 6 years? Do you really think I don't notice when something's wrong? My throat was tight. I tried to swallow. Couldn't. Then tell me. He sat on the coffee table right in front of me, so close I could still smell his soap on his skin. What's going on? I had 2 options. I could keep lying. I could make up another excuse, say it was a client issue, that it was family stuff, that it was any other bullshit instead of the truth that had been burning in my chest for days. Or I could. No, I couldn't. I didn't have the courage. It's nothing. My voice came out too weak. I didn't even believe it. Seriously, Rafa, I just need to sleep properly, and it'll pass. I saw disappointment cross his face. I saw when he was about to say something, when he was going to insist one more time. I was cornered. No way out. But fate decided to intervene in a brutal way. And it was at that exact moment that the lights went out. Everything went dark at once. The fan stopped spinning. The digital clock on the TV went blank. Even the streetlight outside had gone out. Blackout. The silence grew even thicker in the dark. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear his breathing. I could hear my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it too. Holy shit. Rafa's voice came from the dark, closer than I expected. Must be the grid again. It went down twice last week. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because something had changed in that darkness. Something had broken. Maybe it was the fact that I couldn't see his face, couldn't see his reaction, couldn't see the disappointment or the anger or the disgust I was so afraid to see. Maybe it was just that I was too tired of carrying this alone. Maybe it was that, in the dark, I could pretend I was someone else. Someone braver. Someone who wasn't afraid of losing the only friendship that really mattered. Rafa. My voice came out so low it was almost not a voice. I saw. Silence. You saw what? That night. The first night I slept here on the couch. I felt him tense. I felt the shift in the air between us. I wasn't sleeping. The words were coming now, and I couldn't stop them. I pretended I was, but I was awake. And I saw when you... My voice failed. When I what? He was closer now. I could feel the heat of his body inches from mine. Say it, Lucas. When you touched my hair. The silence that followed was so heavy, I felt it crushing my chest. And you whispered something I couldn't quite hear, but that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since. And my voice finally broke. And then it all started coming out. Everything I had kept. Everything I had denied. Everything I had pretended didn't exist. I can't stop thinking about you. I know it's wrong, that we're friends. But I can't pretend everything's normal anymore. Everything's changed, Rafa. I was crying without realizing it. And I'm ashamed. I've never felt this for a guy. I'm ashamed of ruining our friendship, of you looking at me with disgust. Lucas. His voice was so soft it cut my desperation in half. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Because if I stopped now, if I let the silence come back, I'd lose my nerve and I'd have to live with this for the rest of my life. And I know you don't feel this. I know to you, I'm just the weird photographer friend who stayed on the sidelines while you shone on the field. I know you're straight, and this whole situation must be making you fucking uncomfortable, but I can't take it anymore, Rafa. I can't keep pretending I slept well when you ask in the morning. I can't keep averting my eyes every time you take your shirt off. I can't keep dying a little bit every time you talk about some girl you're seeing. I can't do it anymore. My voice was shattered into 1,000 pieces now. It was all coming out at once, and I had no control over anything. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, is that I know after this conversation nothing will be the same. I know I just destroyed the best friendship I've ever had in my life because of a moment of weakness. I know when the lights come back on you'll look at me and see someone different, someone you don't know, someone who invaded the space, who crossed a line they shouldn't have crossed. And I'll have to live with that. I'll have to move out. I'll have to... Lucas, stop. His hands found my face in the dark. I froze. I felt his fingers on my tear-wet cheek. I felt his thumb wiping away the tears that kept falling. I felt his breath so close it mixed with mine. Stop talking. His voice was shaking. Just... stop. And then we stayed there, in complete darkness. His hands on my face. My uncontrolled breathing starting to calm. The silence returned, but different now. Laden with something I couldn't name. I expected him to say something. Anything. To say it was okay. That we'd get through it. That we'd stay friends. Or to say I was right. That I'd ruined everything. That it was better if I left. But he said nothing. He just kept his hands on my face. And I couldn't see his expression. I couldn't read in his eyes what was passing through his mind. I couldn't tell if he was angry, pitying, disgusted, or... Rafa. Shh. His thumb pressed gently to my lips. asking for silence, and I obliged, because there was nothing left to say anyway. I had already said it all. I had already exploded everything. Now all that was left was to wait for his reaction, wait for the verdict, wait to see if what we'd built in 6 years would survive the last 5 minutes. Seconds passed, 5, 10, 20, and the silence continued, heavy, dense, full of possibilities I hadn't had the courage to imagine. Until he took a deep breath. I felt his chest rise and fall. I felt when he was about to speak. I felt when the words were on the tip of his tongue. And then he didn't say anything. The silence stayed. Heavy. Dense. Like all the darkness in the apartment had concentrated in that space between the two of us. I was already preparing for him to stand up and leave. For him to say I'd misunderstood everything. That I'd turned an innocent moment of affection into something that only existed in my head. You know that moment when you think, that's it, I've ruined everything. That was exactly what I was feeling. Because the worst thing wasn't him rejecting me. The worst thing was having let all of this out and realizing that maybe I'd destroyed the only thing that really mattered. Our friendship. The seconds passed and each one felt like an eternity. I could hear his breathing. Irregular. Like he was also trying to find the right words. Or maybe he was just trying to find a gentle way to tell me I'd just ruined everything. And then I heard his voice. Low. Careful. Lucas. Just that. Just my name. But the way he said it. There was something different there. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't the rejection I'd spent the whole night bracing myself for. It was care. Like he was holding something fragile and didn't want to break it. I need to tell you something. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I wasn't asleep that night. Wait. What? When you pretended to be asleep, I knew you were awake. The floor disappeared beneath me. What do you mean you knew? Your breathing changed. When I walked into the room, you were breathing one way, and when I got closer, it changed. It got more controlled. Like when someone tries to breathe normally, but can't. My God, had I been that obvious? And even so, you did that? Silence again. But this time it was different. Not the silence of someone who doesn't know what to say. The silence of someone gathering courage. Lucas, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been holding in for a long time. He took a deep breath. Over the past few months, since I moved in here, it's been different. The way I see you. The way I think about you. And I tried to ignore it. I swear I tried. My mind was trying to process what he was saying, but the words didn't seem to fit together. I thought if I pretended I wasn't feeling anything, it would pass. I thought if I kept acting like I always had, eventually things would go back to normal. But they didn't. He paused. Actually, it only got worse. Every time you laughed at one of my dumb jokes. Every time you worked late and I saw that light still on in your room. Every time you pushed your glasses up when you were nervous. I realized it was getting harder and harder to fake it. I wasn't breathing. I literally couldn't breathe. And then there was that night, when you were on the couch, and I looked at you sleeping. Or at least I thought you were sleeping. And I thought, now or never. Because I needed to know. I needed to test whether what I was feeling was real or if it was just in my head. So you did it on purpose? Knowing I was awake? No, not exactly. I did it because I needed to. Because if I didn't do it then, maybe I'd never have the courage to again. And when I realized you were awake, I'd already gone too far to turn back. My voice came out almost as a whisper. What did you whisper? At that moment. What did you say? His breath caught for a second. I said. I can't pretend anymore. And it was like all the pieces finally fell into place. All those weeks of tension, all those awkward moments, all those looks that lasted a second longer than they should have. It wasn't just me. It had never been just me. Rafa, let me finish. Please. I fell silent. When I broke up with Julia, everyone thought it was because we drifted apart, because routine had ruined the relationship. And in part that was true. But the truth is, I realized I was with her for the wrong reasons. What do you mean? I was trying to prove something. To myself, mostly. Trying to convince myself that if I dated, if I did everything right, if I followed the script everyone expects, eventually I'd feel the way I was supposed to feel. He laughed, but it was a sad laugh. But it didn't work. Because the more I tried to convince myself I was happy, the more I found myself thinking about other things, other people. The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. About you. 2 words. Just 2 words. But they changed everything. I broke up with her because I didn't feel for her what I feel when you walk into the room. My hands were shaking. Why didn't you ever say anything? Fear. Of ruining everything. Of admitting who I am. I tried to distance myself, but your details, the coffee, the playlist, made it impossible. He breathed deeply again. How could I stop feeling this? How could I pretend that you're not the most important person in my life? I was crying just now. Silent tears rolling down my face in the dark. Rafa, when you told me what you saw, what you felt, I was so relieved and so terrified at the same time. Because finally, it wasn't just me. Finally, there was someone who understood. But at the same time, now, it was real. Now we were going to have to deal with it. And we will. Deal with it. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I had forgotten I was capable of feeling. Hope. We will? I could hear the smile in his voice, even without seeing his face in the dark. We will. And then, everything changed. Because it was no longer just me carrying this weight. It was no longer me trying to decode signs and convince myself I was seeing things that weren't there. It was the 2 of us. Finally. Come here, he said. And I did. Even without being able to see anything, I moved toward his voice. I felt my hand find his arm. I felt him take my hand and lace his fingers with mine. I was so afraid of losing you, I whispered. You were never going to lose me. Never. And in that moment, in the dark, with our hands intertwined, I finally felt like I was home. We stayed like that for a while. I don't know how long. Could have been 5 minutes or 5 hours. Time had stopped making sense. Until his phone rang. The light from the screen lit up his face for the first time since the power had gone out. And what I saw there was everything I needed to see. He looked at the screen and made a face. It's my sister. Answer. It must be important. He hit the green button. Hi, Ju. Okay, calm down. Okay. Really? Next week already? No, no problem at all. Of course she can stay here. Okay. Love you. When he hung up, his expression was different. She's coming to visit next week, staying for a few days. Oh, nice. But we knew it wasn't just nice. Because suddenly, the bubble we'd created in that darkness was about to be invaded by the real world. By family. By friends. By expectations. By questions. Lucas, I know. We're going to have to talk about what this means. About how we're going to handle all of this. I squeezed his hand. I know, but we don't have to figure it all out today. No? No. Today. Today we just need to know that we're not alone in this. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed my fingers. Such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. You're right. But even as I said that, I knew things had just gotten a lot more complicated. Because one thing is admitting feelings to each other in the dark, when it's just the two of us and no one else needs to know. A completely different thing is living it. In front of people, in front of his family, in front of the world. And his sister coming next week meant our time in the dark was over. Next week we'd have to decide what we tell her, how we act, whether we come out or keep pretending. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. Nothing. About how everything changed in a matter of minutes. Changed for the better?" I couldn't help the smile. Changed for the much better, but now we have to figure out how to make this work in the real world. Exactly. He draped his arm over my shoulders and pulled me close. "We'll figure it out. Together." And there, sitting on the couch with him, his hand in mine and the certainty that finally, we were on the same page. I had hope, but I was also scared. Because the world out there is not kind to people like us. And his family. His family is conservative, religious. The type that has very clear expectations about how things should be. And I don't fit into those expectations. "Rafa, does your sister, does she know about you, about this?" His silence was answer enough. "No one knows. You're the first person I told. The first person that I admitted this to, actually." My heart tightened. "And you don't have to tell anyone now. We'll go at our own pace. And what if I'm never ready? Then we wait. There's no rush." But there was. We knew there was. Because how were we going to live like this? How were we going to keep sharing this apartment, seeing each other every day, feeling what we feel, and keep pretending it's just friendship? "I don't want to hide you," he said suddenly. "I don't want you to think I'm ashamed or... I don't think that. I swear I don't. But I need time to process, to understand what all of this means to me. Do you understand?" I do, completely. And I did. Because I had spent months, years, maybe, doing exactly the same thing. Trying to understand. Trying to accept. Trying to reconcile who I thought I was with who I really am. "We'll figure this out together," I said, one step at a time. He kissed my forehead, one step at a time. And in that moment, even knowing all the challenges that lay ahead, even knowing his sister's visit was only the beginning of a series of obstacles we'd have to face, I was happy. Because for the first time, I wasn't alone in this. For the first time, there was someone by my side, someone who understood, someone who felt the same way. And maybe that wouldn't be enough to fix all the problems. Maybe we still had a long road ahead. Maybe there would be hard moments, difficult conversations, impossible decisions. But at least we'd face all of it together. And in that moment, in the dark, that was all that mattered. Morning came slowly, as if the day itself were hesitating to meet us. Warm, yellow light crawling through the gaps in the apartment's cheap curtains, illuminating the same couch where everything had started that night. I hadn't slept much. Neither had he, it seemed. We had stayed there in the dark for hours after his sister's call, just sitting close to each other, not saying much, just existing in that new, frightening space we'd created. When I finally went to my room, my body was exhausted, but my head wouldn't stop. Because now I had to think about what came next. The world outside. The people who would look at us differently. The very real possibility of losing not just the friendship, but our sanity in this conservative neighborhood, where everyone knows everyone and everyone has an opinion about other people's lives. But I didn't imagine the real battle would begin before breakfast. I woke up to the smell of coffee. And when I stepped out of the bedroom, Rafa was in the kitchen, turned away from me, fiddling with something on the stove. He was wearing that old school soccer shirt, the same one he wore 6 years ago when we met. I touched my glasses nervously, that automatic gesture I do when I don't know what to do. He turned, our eyes met, and it was strange, because it was the same Rafa as always, the same face I knew better than my own. But at the same time, everything had changed. There was a new vulnerability in his eyes, an openness I'd never seen before. None of us knew how to start. He broke the silence first. We need to really talk about what this means. And I just nodded, because he was right. We couldn't just pretend admitting feelings solved everything. We sat at the small kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between us like anchors, and we began to talk. For real this time. Without the dark to protect us, without the rush of confession to give us courage. He talked first about his family. The sister who was coming to visit next week was the only person he thought might, maybe, possibly understand. But the parents? The conservative grandmother who still lived with them back home? The church friends who still asked when he'd get a girlfriend again? My stomach tightened, because my family wasn't any different. My mom, who always commented when she saw 2 men holding hands on the street, that tone of barely hidden disapproval but impossible to ignore. My dad, who made uncomfortable jokes when watching football. My uncles, who thought that staying silent about it was the same as being tolerant. We live in a neighborhood where people still give sideways looks to anything that strays from the norm, where being different is almost a social crime. And it wasn't just family, it was everything. The neighbors, the folks at the grocery store, the bakery owner who's known us since we were kids. How do we navigate that? Rafa ran his hand through his hair, that gesture he makes when he's processing something hard. And then he said something that took me completely by surprise. We could lose all of that. Family, acceptance, maybe even friends. But you know what we definitely lose if we don't try? Ourselves. My chest tightened in a different way. Not out of fear, but something like hope. Because he was right. We had already lost the innocence of pretending we were just friends. That line had been crossed long before the night he touched my hair. Maybe we'd crossed it years ago, on those nights we stayed up late talking about music and life and dreams. That physical closeness that always felt too natural to be just friendship. I just never had the courage to admit it. But there was another fear, one that hurt even more. What if we try and it doesn't work? What if the attraction we feel now fades and we lose not just the romantic relationship, but the friendship too? 6 years of history, 8 months living together, all those memories and laughs and moments that shaped who I am. How do I risk losing Rafa completely? He was quiet for a while. Then he reached his hand across the table, stopping a few centimeters from mine, without touching, as if giving me the option to retreat. I know it's scary. I'm scared too. But Lucas, we're already running that risk. Because I can't look at you the way I used to. I can't pretend you're just my best friend when I wake up thinking about you and fall asleep thinking about you and spend the whole day aware of every move you make in this apartment. My breath caught, because hearing him say that out loud, in broad daylight, in our mundane, familiar kitchen, was completely different from whispered confessions in the dark. I reached out and touched his hand, just the tips of our fingers meeting. And even then, I felt an electric current. We stayed like that for a while, just feeling the weight of that deliberate, conscious touch. It wasn't accidental. It couldn't be passed off like the hundreds of times we'd touched before. It was a choice. And then I said the thing that had been stuck in my throat since the night before. I think I loved you before I admitted I liked men. I just didn't have the words for it. His eyes went bright. And for the first time since all this started, I saw him smile. Not that performative smile he uses with other people, but the real one. The one that reaches his eyes. We didn't have answers. We didn't know how we'd handle family, the neighbors, the dozens of tiny confrontations that would come up if we actually tried this. We didn't know if we'd work as a couple or implode spectacularly. But we knew one thing. We had already crossed that line. In the heart, if not in our actions. And pretending we hadn't crossed it would hurt more than facing the uncertainty together. The rest of the day was weird. Good, but weird. We moved through the apartment with a new awareness of every nearness. When he passed me in the narrow hallway, our shoulders brushed and we both stopped. Just for a second. Just acknowledging. When I sat on the couch to work on my laptop, he sat beside me. Not on the other side like he always did. Beside me. Thigh almost touching mine. And when the afternoon turned to evening and the golden light started to fade, we ended up again where it had all begun. On the living room couch. The same spot where I had pretended to sleep while he, unknowingly, revealed what was hidden in his chest. But this time I wasn't pretending. We were just sitting there, close on purpose, and I had my sketchbook in my lap. That sketchbook that had always been my refuge, the place where I processed the world when words weren't enough. Rafa looked at me curiously. "You still draw every day?" I nodded. "It's how I think, you know? When everything's messy inside, I draw, and then it makes sense." He was quiet for a moment. "Have you ever drawn me?" I felt my face heat up. Lots of times. He smiled, but it was a gentle, non-judgmental smile. "Can I see?" And there it was. The moment of decision. Because that sketchbook held page after page of studies of his face, his hands, the way the morning light hit his hair by the window. It was visual evidence of years of observation disguised as artistic interest. It was the proof I had never had the courage to show. My hand trembled a little as I opened the book. I flipped slowly, showing the most recent drawings. And there he was, page after page. Rafa laughing. Rafa concentrating. Rafa sleeping on the couch on a Sunday afternoon. His hands, always his hands. He didn't say anything for a while, just looking. And then, with a softness that completely caught me off guard, he took the sketchbook from my hand and set it on the coffee table. And he took my hand. For real this time. Fingers interlaced. Deliberately. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Because this was different. This wasn't accidental. There was no excuse of friendship or familiarity. It was him choosing to touch me. It was me choosing to let him. He leaned closer, and I felt his warmth. The familiar scent of soap and something that was just his. Our foreheads touched. Just that. Just that point of intimate, terrifyingly vulnerable contact. "We'll figure it out," he whispered. "It may not be easy. Probably won't be. But we'll figure it out together." I closed my eyes. I felt the weight of those words. I felt the weight of the choice we were making. Because it wasn't a rational decision. It wasn't safe. It didn't come with guarantees or a map. It was just two guys in their 20s in a small apartment in Portland, choosing the possibility of happiness, even knowing the price they might have to pay. And maybe that was the bravest thing I'd ever done. When we finally pulled apart, still holding hands, I took the sketchbook back. And for the first time, I didn't hide what I was doing. I opened to a blank page, picked up the pencil, and I began to draw his hand, the hand that was holding mine. He watched in silence, his thumb making slow circles on the back of my hand, and I drew every line, every detail. Not hidden this time, not disguised as mere artistic study. It was a declaration. It was documentation. It was me saying without words, "This is real. This is happening. I'm not going to pretend you're just my friend anymore." When I finished, he looked at the drawing for a long time, and then he looked at me. His eyes were watery. "How long have you seen me like this?" "Always," I admitted. "I think. Always." He squeezed my hand. "Then we've wasted too much time already." And maybe he was right. Maybe we'd wasted months, maybe years, dancing around the obvious. But we had now. We had this choice. We had the courage to say yes to something scary and uncertain and potentially devastating. Because in the end, The fear of losing him by not trying was greater than the fear of trying and failing. We sat there as night fell completely, still holding hands, still processing the enormity of what we'd decided. There were no fireworks, no dramatic declaration, no certainty of a happy ending. Just two best friends who'd finally admitted they were much more than that, and had chosen to face whatever came together. I looked at the drawing of his hand, still open in my lap. Years of hidden drawings, years of unsaid feelings, years of pretending the way I looked at him was normal. And now, finally, I didn't have to hide anymore. I don't know how we'd deal with family, judgment, the pressure, but beside him, I felt peace. I was being honest. In that little apartment, we made a silent promise. We'd try. Choose courage. Because Rafa was always worth the risk. He had filled my heart long before I admitted it. We had no script or guarantees, but we had each other. And that night, that was enough. I finally understood what he'd whispered. I can't pretend anymore. And now neither of us had to.